Is Blaziken bad? Blaziken is a really popular Pokemon, and in several generations it's actually banned from the OU tier in Competitive, meaning it's in the same tier as legendaries like Dialga and Mewtwo. But whenever I've used a Blaziken in Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire or Emerald, I've been a bit disappointed with how useful it was. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down the reasons why Blaziken might not actually be as good as people think it is. So the reason why Blaziken is so good in competitive Pokemon is its hidden ability Speed Boost, which patches up its main flaw being its base 80 speed. In-game, Blaziken will have the very situational ability Blaze instead, but for a regular playthrough, Speed Boost really wouldn't be that useful, considering 80 is decently high for Gen 3 standards, and enemy Pokemon will have 0 EVs and 0 IVs. Also, most abilities in Gen 3 are pretty useless, so having Blaze doesn't really hold Blaziken back that much. What I think stops Blaziken from being a great Pokemon to use in-game is its matchup into the Hoenn region. Hoenn is known for being covered in water, which obviously Blaziken is weak to. From the 6th gym onwards, you fight a ridiculous amount of water types, but what makes this worse is that Blaziken's other type, fighting, is resisted by a lot of common water types in the game, like Pelipper, Gyarados, and Tentacool. This means it's really difficult for Blaziken to be used on any of Hoenn's 17 water routes, since your best attacks will be resisted by the vast majority of Pokemon there. Looking at the early game, the first gym presents a bit of a split path. Roxanne's Nosepass is level 15, which means if you play with level caps, you'll be stuck with a Torchic here, who is pretty useless considering rock types resist all of its attacks and 1 or 2 rock tombs will be more than enough to take it down. However, if you don't play with level caps, you can just get your Torchic to level 16 where it evolves into Combusken and becomes a fighting type. And with Double Kick, you've got a pretty good counter to Roxanne's rock types. Apart from the water Pokemon on the beach on Route 109, Combusken should be a pretty good counter to the rest of the early game. It's a decent Pokemon to use against Brawly, and it's one of the few Pokemon who can hit Watson's Steel types for super effective damage. But then it's the Fire Gym, where Combusken will die to 1 or 2 magnitudes from Numel, and won't be able to do a lot of damage to Flannery's Torkoal since it resists fire and has really high physical defense. Even if you teach Combusken the Dig TM, it won't help much, since Magnitude can hit you while you're underground, and Torkoal has Attract, which makes using 2-turn moves really unreliable. Flannery's Torkoal is female, and starter Pokemon have a 7 in 8 chance to be male, so most Combuskens will be vulnerable to Attract. Also, Dig only has 60 power in Gen 3, so even if you do hit Flannery's Pokemon, it won't do that much damage. After that is the normal gym, where you think a fighting type would do well, but your only fighting type attack will still be Double Kick, which you learned all the way back at level 16. This can be alright for Norman's weak Pokemon, but it's only going to be doing a sliver of damage to his Slackings, with their base 160 HP and 100 defense. Normally your best bet against the Slackings isn't actually using fighting type moves, but rather using defensive Pokemon who can take a few hits, like Graveler or Lairon. That leaves us with the final 3 gyms of the game, which are Flying, Psychic and Water type. So you can probably see where this is going. Winona's best Pokemon is an Altaria with Earthquake who resists both fire and fighting. She also has a Pelipper, and every single one of her Pokemon knows Aerial Ace. Tate and Liza have Psychic and Rock type aces, as well as an Earthquake and Claydol in Emerald. And either Wallace or Hoenn will have 5 water types each, meaning in the final 3 gym battles, the most useful thing your starter will be doing is using Brick Break on a Celio. This, combined with the previously mentioned late game water routes, means that between beating the 5th and 8th gym, you're barely going to be able to use Blaziken. Thankfully, the Elite Four provides a couple of good matchups for fire and fighting types. Sydney's dark types are all weak to fighting, and his water types, Crawdaunt and Sharpedo, probably won't one-hit KO you with Surf. Then it's Phoebe, who Blaziken will have an alright matchup against with neutral flamethrowers. 3 out of 5 of Glacier's ice types are part water, which can be an issue in Ruby and Sapphire, but thankfully in Pokemon Emerald, the Celios don't know Surf or Dive, so only Walrein knows a water type move, meaning Blaziken is pretty safe to fire away with Brick Breaks. Then Blaziken goes back to being useless against Drake. In Pokemon Emerald, the champion is Wallace, who has 6 water types, which means Blaziken will once again be useless. But in Ruby and Sapphire, the champion is Steven, so Blaziken can find some use by having super effective fire and fighting moves into Skarmory, Metagross, Aggron and Cradily. So overall, in the Generation 3 games, Blaziken is not great. Being a fire type in Hoenn is unfortunate, and while firefighting is a great combination, the types of Pokemon that bosses use, especially towards the end of the game, make it really difficult for Blaziken to get on the field. Which is a shame, because in the very next generation, Infernape was released, who is hands down one of the best starters in terms of how well they match up into their region. Blaziken is by no means a bad Pokemon, it just has a really unfortunate matchup into Hoenn. If it was the starter Pokemon for a different game, it would probably be on the same level as Infernape in terms of usefulness. Also, it doesn't help that using Blaziken means you give up on Swampert, who is undeniably the best Pokemon to use in the Hoenn region. Thanks for watching, and hopefully, I'll see you next time.